So I've just ridden the brand new BMW R12 and let me tell you, this bike surprised me. Now, if you haven't owned or ridden a Boxer Twin before, then this review is definitely for you, because up until this point, I hadn't either. Yes, this bike surprised me. Yes, this bike's got tons of style, tons of tech, but I want to ask the question and answer the question, is it worth the hefty price tag? And is it a bike that you could live with day-to-day use? Now, the first thing you do notice about the R12 is that obvious move from moving those big double air intake shotguns that you used to get on the R90s, with the air intake now sitting comfortably under the tank. And that tank's really got a classic styling. They've managed to combine this high tech with this classic feel. Up front, you've got a pair of twin analog clocks, and that adds to that retro styling. The tank is nice and wide at the top, but it narrows perfectly with these two brushed aluminium scoops down the sides, which are absolutely perfect for your knees to fit into. You can have an optional TFT display, which I'll get into later under the tech side of things, but my version didn't have it, and personally, if this was my bike, I don't think I'd opt for it either. What I would say is I'm really not a fan of this sort of chrome effect catalytic converter and the big chromey sort of exhaust pipes. For me, they're edging on the cruiser side of things, and if it was me personally, I'd like these in either a brushed aluminium, and where I can, I'd black some of those big chrome effect bits out. Now, surprisingly, the BMW R12 doesn't actually have an electronic fuel gauge. Now, for me, that is a conscious decision by BMW to try and keep things feeling more retro, more old school. That, along with the ignition barrel, which still remains despite the bike being keyless. I think these are an attempt to make the bike feel more retro, more in line with its predecessors, harking back to that history. Because for BMW to consciously leave that out on a bike that's so highly spec'd, it would be absolutely simple for them to just add an electronic fuel gauge. So for me, I think they're trying to keep that resonance to its history in the fact that the owner still has to open that tank and give it a little shake to see how much physical fuel is left in the tank. And I think there is something nice and something endearing about that. I mean, you're not left completely in the lurch. You do have a count up monitor. So once you hit the reserve, what you actually have is an electronic counting up monitor to tell you how many miles you've done since you hit reserve. So you're not left completely in the dark. There is a little bit of tech there for the fuel. So not a deal breaker, but yes, it would be nice if there was an electronic gauge on it. So ergonomics and seating, very comfortable. At 5'5", I'm not completely flat foot in the bike. I am slightly tiptoeing on one side, but it is very comfortable and the seating position is very comfortable. Now, like I mentioned, if you haven't ridden a Boxer engine bike before, then you are aware of those big twin engines jutting out at 90 degrees either side of the bike. And that, combined with those big wide bars, does make the bike feel wide. However, it is really ergonomic, it is very comfortable and very manoeuvrable, and that is added to by the scooping of that tank that allows your knees to fit in quite neatly into the bike. So when you're actually sat on the bike, you don't feel like you're sat on a big block and cube. You actually feel like you're sat in this nice, neat little bike, and those big wide bars just help you manoeuvre that bike around. Speaking of those wide bars, they are what demands the presence on the road, and I love the way that BMW have blended all of this modern tech with these classic lines. It doesn't feel like they're trying too hard to achieve that modern retro styling. Everything just seems to fit perfectly in and around this chunky tubular frame design. It's almost like they designed the frame and then they vacuum packed everything really neatly inside of it. Nothing seems out of place, it all just flows and it oozes that BMW premium build. So if you've never ridden a Boxer twin engine bike before, it's a completely different riding experience from, say, a parallel twin or an inline four. One of the things you first notice is when you blip the throttle at standstill, the whole bike actually lurches side to side from those twin cylinders firing out horizontally, and I'll explain why that might matter. So at low speeds, although the bike doesn't chug at standstill, it feels like there's a bit of a flat spot, and you especially notice this when you're filtering through town or pulling away from things like traffic lights and roundabouts. Being a Boxer twin, I found you can't slip the clutch and blip the throttle like you would on an inline four or the parallel twin. This bike's fantastic on open roads and twisties, but waiting to pull away on a roundabout or doing a low speed turn in the road, I was a little bit more apprehensive. So on the twisties and those faster roads, this bike is absolutely phenomenal and I absolutely loved it. It really just wants to go, and it wants to go quick, especially when you put it in dynamic mode. The bike just flies. I was blown away by the power and the torque that this bike had, but I was equally impressed with that powerful engine braking backed up by the braking and suspension systems. It really allowed you to push this bike and push it hard. Now this bike's got a shaft-driven 6-speed boxer engine, and that power really is transferred directly to that back wheel. Now I'm not a fan of the sound on these BMWs. I haven't really heard one that I really think like, oh yeah, that engine sounds amazing, even with aftermarket exhausts. But I think if you was to put a different end can on it, it could be something that you could improve slightly. Now, in terms of the bike and its tech, it's got 3 main rider modes, and they are road, rain and dynamic mode. Now, the day that I took the bike out for a test ride, it had actually been raining pretty heavily in the morning, and it was starting to brighten up in the later afternoon. What that actually meant was I was able to put those 3 rider modes to the true test. So with the wet leaves on the ground, I slipped the bike into rain mode, and I could instantly feel the throttle response soften, the acceleration smoothed out, and everything was far less aggressive. The smart tech also adjusted traction control, and the ride just felt really steady and safe. Road mode was perfect for just bimbling through town, and it gives you a lot more balanced everyday feel. Once you get out onto the twisties, dynamic mode is basically BMW's sport mode, and everything just sharpens up. The throttle is a lot more aggressive and the bike just comes alive. You can instantly feel the difference, and in dynamic mode, you really just want to go. The bike is urging you to go just a bit harder, and you feel safe to do so because you just feel that the tech has got your back and it's ironing out all of those small little rider errors. Now, for a big boxer engine, the bike is surprisingly nimble. Now, it may not be as nimble as some of its competitors in its field, but it never fails to deliver. With the weight sitting really low, it never feels top heavy. So doing low speed manoeuvres or walking the bike round on foot, it's pretty easy to manoeuvre. What I would say is if you get that bike out on the twisties, I don't think any of those competitors are going to come close. When it comes to the braking, you got 2 massive twin floating discs up front with 4 piston Brembo calipers, and the rear's got a single rotor with a 2-pot BMW caliper. And let me just say, the braking on this bike is absolutely phenomenal. It's all tied into BMW's intelligent braking system called ABS Pro, which basically adjusts the braking along with your lean angle, so it balances out the front and rears to prevent the wheels locking up. The suspension is equally impressive. Up front you've got these massive Marzocchi upside down forks, and at the rear you've got a single monoshock with a single-sided swing arm. So the base model of the R129T in 2025 comes in at £14,420. Now if you want any of those extras like cruise control and the comfort package, each of those things are obviously priced individually, but you could see the bike well exceeding the £16,000 mark. So is the BMW R129T the ultimate bike for 2025? Well, I've got to admit, for me, there are a few issues and a few drawbacks. So around town at low revs, the bike can feel a little bit stubborn, and I could see that you'd have to work a little bit harder to make this bike work in everyday life. Things like filtering through traffic, for example, would become a little bit more problematic. That flat spot on the boxer engine doesn't really allow you to slip the clutch and blip the throttle. But once you're moving, however, motorways, twisties, it is powerful, and it is packed with bundles of clever tech that help inspire your ride with confidence. You know that bike has your back, and you literally can't stop grinning. One thing that really stood out to me, that really stayed with me, was that pure unadulterated power, both when you're working through those rev ranges, but also when you're scrubbing off that speed. That engine braking was beautifully aggressive and phenomenal at winding things back. Despite being super tech heavy, this bike oozes classic style, and the combination of top tech and classic styling just seems to work effortlessly. What I would say is, yes, day to day it might be a little bit harder to handle, but I think it's something that you get used to. And then you've got to ask yourself the question, is this a bike that I'm going to use every day, or is this going to be my weekend bike that I'm going to have fun on? If it was your day-to-day commuter, I think you'd have a little bit more of a problem if you're going to be filtering and doing low-speed manoeuvres. But I think once you get that bike out onto twisties, it's going to make you grin so much, it'll make you think, stuff it, I might just have to get used to that, like that flat spot. Yeah, it was a bike that did make me think, I could have one of these in my garage for sure. So I hope you found this video helpful. If you're considering upgrading your bike for 2025 and the R129T's in there, then hopefully this video's helped you out a little bit. One thing I would say is I've also got a video on the Triumph Speed Twin 1200, the 2025 edition. So if you're considering a bike in that sort of category and price range, then I've got a video on obviously both of those bikes that you might find useful. What I will be doing in the next few weeks as well is doing a comparison between the two and the pros and cons of both, so keep your eyes peeled for that. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, you can do so by clicking the button below, and if you click that little bell icon, then that will give you a notification every time I release a video. So all that's left for me to say is, in the meantime, safe riding, safe driving, happy adventures, and I'll see you in the next one.